My name's Andrew Atkinson and I'm the Welsh Conservative Party candidate for Wrexham. Health is the biggest issue, there's absolutely no doubt about that. Being virtually every single conversation I have on the doorstep, health is the first thing that comes up, and it's usually, the NHS in Wales, followed by a series of questions or a series of points to be made. We make no apologies for the fact that health is our number one priority going into this election in the Welsh Conservatives manifesto. We would make sure we've got a properly resourced, well-funded NHS budget. We have seen over the last 5 years the Welsh Labour government cut over £1 billion from the health budget, and that has had devastating consequences. That hasn't happened in any other part of the UK, so we've got to make sure that we get the budget levels back up, and we've got to, by putting more money in, we've got a well-resourced health service for the patients, the kind of health service that the staff deserve as well as the patients, but also it gives certainty. Because when we're looking at recruits, if you see, we've seen very busy campaigns like the Save the Mile Hospital campaign, which I've been very involved in. When you see campaigns like that, and the crux of that issue is recruitment and retention of staff, when we've got newly qualified medical staff and they've got the opportunity to go anywhere really, and they go to Liverpool or Manchester or Cardiff, it's a bit more difficult to attract them to North Wales. But when you've got the axe hanging over a department constantly for years saying this department might close, it creates uncertainty. So we've got to have the funding levels up to make sure that we've got properly resourced NHS, but also so that people have got the service that they deserve, and we've got the certainty for the staff so that we can recruit staff and we can retain those staff as well. We've been very clear that we would make big changes on this one. The Diamond Review is ongoing at the moment. The interim report from the Diamond Review has shown that this is unsustainable and that the current level of tuition fees is unsustainable. And I think most parties, will have to address that at some point in the future, all parties, if they're not willing to address it at the moment. And what we've said is that we recognise, and along with the report and other people, we recognise that it's better to give students a more targeted form of support through what we're coming up with, quite an innovative scheme of a rent rebate, because we see that more people are put off going to university by the fact that they can't afford the living costs, the cost of living, not put off by the cost of learning. So there would be a radical change to the tuition fees, but that would be supported by giving people this rent rebate to make sure that they can afford their rent and concentrate on their studies. We've got some brilliant schools across Wrexham. We've got some brilliant schools in Wales. We've always recognised, I think locally when you talk to people, there's always a couple of schools that they've always sort of fought to get their kids into. Sadly, over the last few years, we've seen people desperate locally to get their children into Bishop Heber, across the border, and we've got to make sure we've got schools of, really, really high standard, and we've got a good number, but a really, really high standard here locally in Wrexham. Because when, we don't want to lose funding that we would have for children, here, we want to keep our brightest and best children here as well, so that everybody's got the opportunity to learn together, and we've got the brightest and the best talent being trained up in Wrexham, in Wales. We would, as a party, directly fund education, because we recognise that a fifth of the budget never reaches the classroom. So this is a reform that would actually see more funds actually reaching the front line, reaching education, and putting the people in charge who know, that we recognise know best. So that's your head teachers, your parents, the governors of the school, and actually giving them more control over the schools, but more funding actually reaching the classroom. Because I believe, I'm the right person to get the job done. Ultimately, it's for the local people of Wrexham to decide who they want. But I think that I've got what it takes, that I'm willing to work with anybody. I think I'm pragmatic in my approach, that I'm not so party political, that, there's people I won't work with. I will work with anybody to get the job done. I've got experience from when I was a councillor and a life outside of politics. I wasn't sort of born with a desire to go into politics, and this was all I wanted to do. I had a sort of late entry into politics, if you like, because there were certain things that I wanted to change in my community. So I think that's quite a healthy route into politics. That's got me sort of focused on the issues and not that sort of party politics that I can only focus, on what's important to a party. My view is that I will do whatever is right for the people of Wrexham. So there's times when I was a councillor, good number of occasions where I would vote against my own party if I didn't think that was in the best interest of my constituents, because you are elected to stand up for your constituents. So whatever the job is, whether it's at the highest level in Cardiff or whether it's just getting stuck into any issues on the streets of Wrexham, I will be there and I'll be leading from the front. Well, regeneration and regeneration of our town centres is exactly what sort of got me into politics and, really got my interest in politics in the first place. So, this is a subject really, really close to my heart. We are a market town, you're exactly right. And I maintain that if anybody sort of came down from Mars and their job was to pinpoint where the town centre of Wrexham is, they would really struggle now. Would it be Eagles Meadow, where a lot of the big shops are and the big names? Would it be around sort of Hendler Street, where you got a lot of the old sort of Victorian shops? Over to Island Green, the King Street, where the bus station is, and that's really difficult. So it's very hard to sort of move with the times and keep your identity and your sort of roots as a market town at the same time. So I always want to see our markets protected, all of our markets looked after and protected. I think the Arts Hub, that was a really, really controversial one locally, but I think it could be good for the town. I think it could be really good, but it's important because local people fought for it to have the market element maintained, so that market traders would be a part of it. Because if you can have a really vibrant market and bolstered with the arts, I think that can be a good thing. If you've got an arts hub and it's trying to be bolstered with a little bit of market here and there, the other way around doesn't necessarily work. So we've got to have, a really solid approach to the town. But when it comes to your question about the Welsh government, what can they do? We are committed as the Welsh Conservatives to abolishing business rates for small businesses, because we've had this perverse system for years where we take massive amounts of business rates off people, and the government, and nationally as well, the government's had it both ways, because whether the shop's empty or whether the shop's occupied, they still get the business rates. So there's not really been an incentive for governments to actually do anything and sort of step in and address the rates issue, because they've got the bread buttered both sides. But we've got a chance now to do things differently, because there's no point taking huge amounts of money off people, watching our town centres go downhill, and then gifting back a pot of money to say, here we are, aren't we great with the Welsh government, this is to help regenerate your high street. Just give people a break, take less money off them in the first place, and they will do what sensible business people do. They will, take on a new member of staff, they will invest it in the business, they'll reinvest, and our high streets, combined with other measures, will be really strong and vibrant again. I don't really have any lines in the sand of what should never be devolved to Wales. I think, we can have a grown-up discussion as a nation about what we think is important. I recognise, through a lot of people that I speak to every day on the doorstep, a lot of people never wanted the Welsh Assembly in the first place. The important thing is, whether people wanted it or not, we've got it, and it has huge amounts of control over our daily lives. Education, health, the economy, the list goes on. More is controlled through Cardiff Bay than in Westminster if you live in Wales. But I don't think that should stop us ever having a discussion about what we should run here. We can have, we can do anything well here. We've got good talent here. We really got the people. So it's about, certain things I think should go to a referendum, certain things we should have discussions about, and actually involve people in those decisions and actually ask them what they want for the future of Wales. I think there is a case for local authorities doing it, because local authorities can have the opportunity to know what's on their doorstep. They get immediate feedback. If you look in, the town centre forum, where we've got, a lot of sort of active members of the community, we've got people from the council, we've got volunteers, we've got, people from the business community. People have got a direct link into the council in a way that they don't always feel like they do with their other politicians. And I think they can, give immediate feedback about, how rates are hurting them, or, what difference a certain change would make. So I think that's really important. But again, it's one for a bigger discussion and sort of to look at the wider picture. But ultimately, as Conservatives, we want to push power out to the community. We don't want to see power centralised to Cardiff Bay, and we're seeing an awful lot of that at the moment, where actually decision-making is in danger of getting more remote than ever before through, less councils and not involving people in decision-making, about whether that should happen or whether that shouldn't, not even asking people their opinion, which we would put to a referendum. we're in danger of seeing more and more power being sucked away and concentrated into Cardiff, whereas actually people could be taking decisions closer to home that would have real impact and benefit to them. Well, as a party of government in Westminster, we've made sure, unemployment is at its lowest level. We've seen more people in work than ever before. And what I really want to do is to build on that success, but make Wrexham the sort of job hub that that it once was, and really sort of put us back on the map. Really build that industrial estate, make it easier than ever before for somebody to come to Wrexham and to base a business here. Build on our natural links, our infrastructure. And if we want to attract businesses at the sort of smallest level, like I've already said, we can really help with sort of addressing something like business rates, because people do invest back in their business and take somebody on. We want to help people keep more of their own money. We want Wales to be the low tax capital of the UK. So we want it to be, the most attractive place in the UK that you can base a business. The UK is already one of the most attractive nations with our corporation tax rate. We want to build on that to make Wales even more attractive, with greater incentives on income tax for people who choose to work and live here. But we want, all of those things can only be achieved when we address our infrastructure issues. If we've got the best road network, the best rail links into the northwest, which is where our economic links are, we make sure we've got access to super fast broadband for every business on our industrial estate and across Wrexham, addressing the issues of mobile phone signal and data and more. Once we address all of those, we've got a real fighting chance of attracting the best possible businesses here to Wrexham to base themselves. Well, for a start, I wouldn't mention anything negative about anybody else. That's not my style, and I don't think that has any place in politics. So I could only tell you what I think, that I've told you about myself before, that I think is a selling point. I'm somebody who'll roll my sleeves up and get the job done. I'm somebody who'll work hard. I am not interested in that petty party political mudslinging. There are certain times when it's important to point out a previous government's record on something, and point out, their track record. And I think that's very different to sort of focusing on an individual, and I think elections should be about what you would do and not what somebody else would not do or isn't doing or hasn't done. So I would always focus on myself, the track record that I can demonstrate to people from what I've done in other walks of life, what I would bring to politics, and how if I got elected, I would really shake things up. I genuinely couldn't think of an option that I'd be happy with other than, and this sounds terrible because you've already said it, in your question, I do want us to have an outright win, because I think we can have an outright win. As a party in the general election, we polled 408,000 votes. That's more votes across the whole of Wales than any Labour government has ever formed a government with. So we've got the votes. We actually do have the votes out there. If those people come out and vote in this election, which I think they're suitably motivated to do with issues of health, education and more, we can form a government. That's the same in Wrexham. I polled 2,000 more votes than an assembly member was elected with the previous time. So the votes are there. We can do it. So I would hope that we wouldn't need a coalition. Although I was happy in coalition in 2010 government, in the UK government, I think there was a lot of merit in that, and I think it does force a good bit of healthy conversation and cooperation at times. So read into that what you like. I don't think that's been hidden away. This was from an NHS report, I believe, back in 2009, which identified £1 billion worth of waste, which I believe was occurring annually in the NHS. Now, this waste takes into account absolutely everything you can think of, which has had high media coverage, everything from buying fruit and vegetables at inflated prices instead of using local suppliers where you could get a better deal, to the cost of wasted prescriptions, for example. Wasted prescriptions is a massive issue in the NHS, where real money could be saved, and real resources saved. So I think that's not about cuts at all. We've pledged that we would not cut the NHS as Labour did in the last Assembly term, but we would increase spending on the NHS. But that still means you've got to get the most bang for your buck and actually make sure that as wise stewards of public money, you are spending that money in the most financially sound way possible. So if you can get a better deal that's better for the taxpayers of Wales, then that's absolutely what we should be doing, and we should be eliminating waste. There's no bones about it. That's a great question. No, I don't think it is. I don't think it's the role. I don't think it's the role of a councillor. What we've got, and I've said this a number of times. I said it in the general election. What we've got in Wales is a lot of duplication, and we've got the Assembly, and the Assembly can perform a great role. And after 17 years, it's desperately time for a new government and a new change of direction in Wales and a fresh focus. But with the Assembly has come duplication, because a Welsh MP's role is obviously smaller than their English counterpart, because a Welsh MP isn't dealing with health, education, the economy and the like for their constituents. When they vote on those matters, it affects England and not Wales. So there's an awful lot of duplication. And my view is, we've got to be using our roles, no matter what we're doing, to show leadership, because there is duplication. That means there's more time available, if you like, to actually get out there and get stuck into community matters. People care about these big issues. As we've already said, the NHS is the biggest issue. But also, if you talk to people, a huge issue is their town centre. A huge issue is, how they feel about walking around their town, or whether they feel safe at home or secure, And these are all local issues that we can get stuck into. So some of them, as I've said, fall into the role of a member of parliament. Some of these issues become an assembly member or a councillor's role, or heaven forbid, a police and crime commissioner or anybody else. But it's about somebody saying, actually, somebody needs to pull all this together, show some leadership, and actually lead from the front to actually show that it doesn't matter whose role it is or whose role it should be, or whether somebody's doing it or not doing it, but they're going to roll the sleeves up, as I've said before, get stuck in and get the job done. So if that means, I take a bit of stick for organising a street clean or working with a great team of volunteers on the street festivals, I will continue to do it, because it's right for Wrexham.